Today I'll be showing you one of the most powerful sequencers that I know called SEQUND. To illustrate to you the power of this plugin, I'm going to create an ambient pad, a bass line, and a melody. And by the end, you'll have something that sounds like this. Nice. So let's dive in. I've created a drum groove for a starting point, 4 to the floor, 120 BPM. Sounds like this. First thing we're going to do is create 2 MIDI tracks. Command-Shift-T, hit that twice, you get 2 MIDI tracks. I'm going to color them blue so I know these are the melody. And in the first MIDI track, we're going to load up the sequencer device that I've mentioned called SEQUND. And that's in the plugins folder, VST3. Just load it onto this layer. Looks like this by default. And on the second layer, you can use any synth. I use Diva because you know it's my favorite synth. I'm just going to load it in here. But if we hit play now, nothing happens. We just hear the drums. That's because we have to link the sequencer with the Diva layer. So what I'm going to do is open up these channels a bit so we can see the input and output routing. In this Diva channel, we're going to select SEQUND as our input. And where it says post effects, you also want to make sure that you select SEQUND as the sequencer, as the input sequencer. And now all you have to do is set it to input so it receives the MIDI from this channel. So the MIDI that's output from track 5 is routed into track 6. Now let's go back to the second sequencer. Open it up, and just to start things off, we're going to create a really basic sequence by adding some notes in this gate panel over here. Okay, it's on a pretty low octave, so I'm going to pitch it up a few octaves here, maybe 1 or 2. All right, now I'm going to go back to Diva and select a preset, something that sounds rather plucky. Perfect, that sounds fine, just so we have something to work with in the sequencer here. So you see, whenever the gate is on, our notes play. And currently we're using the scale C chromatic, so let's change it to D factory presets. Let's go for Dorian, D-Dorian, D-Dorian. Now we can change the pitch of these individual notes. And no matter what pitch we set it to, it will always be locked to the scale of D-Dorian. Pretty cool. By the way, if you like this sequencer, you can grab it at a discounted rate down below. Just use the link and type in Lotus10 at checkout and you will get it for 10% off. Maybe transpose it down an octave again. Maybe blend in a few notes here. Maybe we can add a few more notes here. Right beneath pitch A, you can see a pitch B, and you might be asking yourself, why do we need 2 pitches? And if I draw in notes here, nothing seems to change. But if I change the probability to select notes from the pitch B sequence, then it'll choose these notes rather than these. And this probability selector over here, these little triangles, they let you select either one or the other. So you can build a second sequence here and one over here, and you can tell this probability slider to select either one of the two, or maybe go for a 50-50 chance, and it'll select either the pitch A or pitch B. You see, it creates a bit of variety and inconsistencies in the sound, which I really like. So if you want to build your sequence, you can keep it with pitch A. But if you'd like some more variety in the sound, you can also move to sequence B. But we're going to stick with pitch A for now, just for the sake of keeping it really simple. And you can also undo each and every single step. So if you'd like to revert back to an earlier position, you can do that using undo, which is really handy. You can see a ton of parameters being blended out currently, like hold, ratchet, length, and chance. We can always blend in these parameters individually, so then this panel just becomes larger and larger. Remember, we're going to keep it really simple, so let's start with ratchet. Ratchet can be really interesting if you want to create a stutter effect for a certain note, like this. So that's an effect that you can hear very often in melodic techno. You can also change it to 3 or 2 ratchets. Can also change the length of the notes here. And you can also change the chance or the probability of each note to be played. So you can select notes and maybe set the chance to 0. So you get like this call and response type phrasing, right? You can set these to 0, maybe this to 100. Blend in a few notes. So you get a rather subtle sequence. That can be really cool as well. You can also change the octave individually here for certain notes. And you can also blend in the transpose. So if you want a certain step to be pitched up, let's say step number 3, we want it to be pitched up by 3 semitones. We can just change that here, and it will change that for the entire step. So pitch B and pitch A will be pitched up 3 semitones. And because we've set it to before scale, the transpose, that means that it will always stick to D Dorian. That's really cool. But what I like to do is turn off the transpose function here, turn on transpose via MIDI, which is this one over here, C1 to C3, and record arm the track so it receives MIDI input. That means we can now play on our keyboard, and you can see depending on the note that I press on my keyboard, it changes the transposition value over here. So if I hit play now, I'm playing notes on my keyboard and it's changing the entire sequence. Yeah, that can be pretty cool if you'd like to create a bit more movement and melodic variation to your sequence. But for now, we're going to keep it simple and just blend it out, change the transpose value to 0, and stick with the sequence that we've come up here. Maybe change the velocity on some hits so some are softer than the others. So the higher note is being played at a higher velocity, as you can see here. You have these patterns, so you could also copy pattern 1, right-click copy, move to pattern 2, paste it over here, and blend in this keyboard button over here. So now C0 to B0 allows you to switch through these individual patterns, and I'm going to do that really quickly here. So right now I'm hitting C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and you see how that's jumping through these individual patterns? That can be really nice as well. If you like a sequence, what you can do is just generate a sequence here. So if your DAW doesn't have any ability to record MIDI, you can just generate the sequence here, click on this little loop icon, and drag and drop your sequence. And there you go. You have the MIDI generated. You can also set a loop length of, 8 bars, generate a sequence, drag and drop, and it'll give you a sequence of 8 bars of MIDI notes, which is pretty amazing. But for now, let's delete it and work with the second sequencer. What I believe is really awesome about this sequencer is that you can also decrease the step length of each and every single lane individually. So let's say the pitch, you want to keep that at 5, or the gate, you want to keep that at 7. So you create these really interesting polyrhythmic results, and you can do that for every single one of these lanes. So it starts cycling differently. If we change everything back to 16, everything starts sounding very on the grid, on point. Dum da da dum dum dum. Like you know what's gonna happen. But if you decrease the length of, let's say, just the gate, notice how it starts cycling differently. It becomes a bit more polyrhythmic. You get results that you did not expect, which I find to be really powerful. And the ability to do this with each and every single one of these parameters is really amazing. And now let's work with the MIDI. So I'm going to close off the second sequencer, change it to auto, and change the input back into all ins. So now we're not taking any MIDI input, just the drums playing. But if I take my MIDI sequence and put it here, it starts playing the sequence. Let's loop this for now. So first, let's create a pad. I'm going to do that by loading up a reverb. Simply hit play. And then hit freeze at a particular moment. You can do that again. Yeah, that sounds cool. Then you can create a new audio track. Hit resampling. Put the MIDI back here. So we just record the ambient sequence. Make sure it's soloed and hit record. Oh. Yeah, that should be enough. We just really need a bar. Take that, loop it up. Disable freeze and combine that with the MIDI sequence now. So we have ourselves a pad and a melody. Now we can take the pad, maybe pitch it up an octave. Maybe just a perfect fifth, 7 halftone steps. Mess around with the envelopes. I like keeping it on Complex Pro because it gives you more control over the tonality of the sound. Now we can go back to the Diva, maybe create a plucky sound here. Or we could also pitch it up an octave over here. So let's call this one melody. This one's going to be pad. And now let's create a new MIDI track underneath second. Give it a red color since we want to create a bass now. And same thing. What we're going to do is select the input to be track 5, second. Where it says post effects, you just want to select second as your input sequencer. Change it to input. And then you want to load up your synth. I'm just going to copy the Diva from the lower layer down here. Copy. Basta. And disable the low cut since we're working with a bass now. Go for a bass sound. And I'm not saying you need these presets. You can select any preset that you feel like works. Ableton Stock has a ton, but I'm just working with Diva because I like it and I want to keep this tutorial somewhat short. So I'm going to stick with that bass sound. Let's go back into second, open up second here. And let's disable the octave since we want to be able to control it globally here. Change it to 2. How about we change the gate length now? What you could also do is randomize the steps. But if you don't like the way it randomizes you the steps, you could hit these 3 dots here, decrease the density, so it will just randomize it a bit. I've decreased it to 5 from 100. So if I hit randomize, you see it'll just create me slight variations. And if you hit this lock button over here, you can individually lock your steps like this. So if you randomize, no matter how many times you randomize, these steps that are locked will never be randomized. So you can step lock basically everything here, which is also pretty cool. All right, so let's generate 2 bars. Generate, drag the MIDI, put it onto the bass layer, set it to auto, all ins, and if we hit play, cool, that's our sequence. And what we could do is just double click the sequence now, select maybe 1 bar or 16ths and loop a certain section that we like. For example, just this one. Got ourselves a bass line. Let's drag the pattern till the very end. And you can also select maybe a different section like this. That sounds kind of cool. So Shift Tab to move out of this panel. And we can also open up our bass patch here and change the cutoff. Increase the release. And we can also tweak our MIDI on the melody. We could always go back to the individual layers, for example, the melody, and change our sequence here. Nice. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. And again, if you like the sequencer, feel free to grab it using the link down below. And to get an additional 10% off, just type in Lotus10 at checkout. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.